Welcome back to my X-Men series. For those of you who are new here, I'm going through each of the X-Men movies and reviewing them one by one. This is coinciding with both the series' 20th anniversary and the release of the final film in the franchise, The New Mutants, which I have seen and I'll have a review for that out by the end of this week. Let me know what you think of the X-Men movies in the comments below, and make sure to give this a thumbs up if you like these reviews. It helps me out immensely if you do that. I already reviewed the first 10 movies, and I'll leave a link to the playlist in the description in case you missed any of them. And if you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with my reviews of the rest of the series. But now let's talk about the 11th film in the franchise, Deadpool 2. Ryan Reynolds is back as Wade Wilson, now having fought as Deadpool for 2 years. He befriends a young boy named Russell, played by Julian Dennison, who's soon hunted by a time-traveling soldier named Cable, played by Josh Brolin. When Wade finds himself at odds with the X-Men, he puts together his own team known as X-Force to protect Russell and stop Cable. This sees most of the creative team behind the first Deadpool movie return for this. Writers Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, who wrote the first film, also co-wrote this, though along with Reynolds himself this time around. But Tim Miller, who directed the first movie, didn't come back for this. Instead, David Leitch, who also directed Atomic Blonde, Hobbs and Shaw, and was co-director on the first John Wick, is at the helm for this. When I initially went into this, I admittedly didn't have super high expectations for it. I liked the first Deadpool movie, and I know it gave Deadpool fans pretty much everything they wanted, but I was never a Deadpool fanatic. I wasn't as angry as everyone else when his mouth was sewn shut in Origins, though for the record it was an extremely dumb decision, and while I found the first Deadpool funny, not all of the humor landed for me. I figured with pretty much everyone behind that film back for this, it would be more of the same. But actually, I like this a lot more. In fact, I love this movie, and seeing it again for this series cemented it for me as one of the best action comedies made in recent years. The job of a sequel is usually to go one step beyond what the first movie did. Now, what ends up happening with most famous franchises is that the first movie remains the best, but when a sequel is done right, it ups the stakes of the first film and presents us a story on a much grander scale while still maintaining the essence of the original. And that's the case for this movie. While the tone remains exactly the same as the first Deadpool, its action scenes are better, especially thanks to Leitch's involvement as he used to be a stunt coordinator, and it works better as a comedy, and it seems with Reynolds on board as a co-writer this time around, it helped things creatively. My major complaint with the first movie is that it essentially went through the same three types of jokes, with Deadpool breaking the fourth wall, Deadpool making a pop culture reference, and Deadpool coming up with one of his own unique insults. And that's all present for this film. I'd like to make it clear that those jokes still have a strong presence here, but I felt there were a lot of times in the first movie where it would make these jokes for the sake of making them. There were scenes where characters would go on tangents to see how inventive they can get to describe outlandish situations, and it would stop the movie dead in its tracks, and it felt like it was trying really hard to especially make up for how Deadpool was handled in Origins. This film felt more to the point, and a lot of the conversations flowed smoothly and more naturally. While there was plenty of riffing, it didn't totally stop everything to turn a whole exchange into nothing but riffs, and it instead kept things moving quickly from one thing to the next and was paced much better. Also, outside of some narration in a few scenes, it didn't go all in on the whole Deadpool talking to the audience shtick that I felt never really worked in the first movie. Instead, all of Deadpool's meta jokes were kept directed at other characters, and I think these landed better, including one joke where it involved a few cameos inside the X-Men mansion. The jokes felt more relevant to the situation at hand and weren't Deadpool stopping things to remind us that he knew the audience is there, and because of that, I found myself laughing out loud much more here. As for the story, is it exactly original? Not at all. It's essentially a comedic version of the Terminator movies, and it will follow similar plot points, which the film will acknowledge. There are also times things will jump from point A to point B a lot more smoothly than they should, and Deadpool will just say that's lazy writing and moves on. It knows it's not here to be the deepest or most complex film and embraces its shortcomings. It also felt more eventful than the first movie. As I said, its pacing felt very quick and it kept switching up the situations Deadpool would be in. We see a few familiar locations from the first movie, like the mansion and Blind Al's apartment, but we also have Deadpool in car chases, in a prison, and even some scenes where he visits the afterlife. And it doesn't spend too much time in one particular location. It's always on the move, and between the constant shifts in setting and the wider array of characters, it also helps strengthen the jokes, as you didn't have Deadpool just riffing on the same few things over and over again. Because there was more to play around with, the jokes felt much fresher. As for the characters, I liked them more here. Whereas the conflict in the first movie surrounded Deadpool versus this one-dimensional evil scientist, the conflict here surrounds characters with much more distinct personalities, even if their backstories weren't anything too original. The reason Cable goes back in time to kill this kid is once the kid gets his first taste of killing, he goes down a deep dark path and it ruins Cable's timeline. But he's likable before that. And Deadpool forms a bond with him in the beginning, and they have some fun moments together that allows you to connect with him on an emotional level. Same goes for Cable himself. Even though he's supposed to be more of this Terminator figure, he's not one-dimensional. He isn't this silent killer type with this cold heart. We see him engage and heavily interact with the other characters in meaningful ways, and we end up enjoying seeing him on screen. And part of this has to do with the performances. While these aren't the most in-depth characters, part of their strong personalities are derived from the charismatic performances of the actors. Ryan Reynolds is once again excellent as Deadpool. Like in the first movie, we do get to see a little bit of Wade's serious side so that it shows us why we should be invested in him. He spends a lot more time with his mask off here than we saw in the first movie, and we see a little more of what makes him tick emotionally. And Reynolds does a great job with the serious material, all the while still cracking small jokes here and there so that it doesn't make any of the tonal shifts feel too jarring. Though when he's in costume, that's when he's at his best. He seems even more comfortable this time around, which may have to do with the fact that he had a hand in some of the writing, so he's saying some of his own jokes. He's full of energy and charm, and he is an absolute blast to watch from start to finish. We do get the return of Stefan Kapicic and Brianna Hildebrand as Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead respectively, though since this is focused more on Deadpool's own team, they're used much more sparingly here. A lot of the jokes are more of the same from the first movie, though they still work. It's heavily focused on insult humor between them and Deadpool, and they were fun. But Deadpool's main partner here is Domino, played by Zazie Beetz, and she is fantastic. I think she's going to be a major force on the big screen in the years to come. She had incredible chemistry with Reynolds, and her comedic timing was on point with this deadpan delivery. Josh Brolin was also awesome as Cable. He honestly nailed the role. He made the character feel badass, though he and Reynolds also had this chemistry that was reminiscent of an 80s buddy movie. Leach compared them to Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy's relationship in the movie 48 Hours, and that's the perfect analogy. For those who haven't seen that movie, one has a much wilder energy about them, while the other is also funny, but in a sarcastic, more deadpan sort of way. And that's what we get here. Similar to Beetz, Brolin had a deadpan delivery to go along with Reynolds' wild energy. Plus, he shined big time in the action scenes, as did Julian Dennison as Russell, who was another great foil for Reynolds. The action scenes in general were a lot of fun, and again, that definitely has plenty to do with Leach being a former stunt coordinator. This guy was the co-director of the original John Wick, which is easily one of the best action movies in the last decade, and he has an eye for what makes an enjoyable action scene. They were very smooth, choreographed well, and kept the film moving at a rapid-fire pace. The use of physical comedy was also excellent. The sight gags, especially when the X-Force is first in action, were hilarious, and a lot of the stunts were timed perfectly. It definitely built upon the first movie's feel of being this live-action Looney Tunes cartoon. They were explosive, over the top, and because of how smooth everything was executed, they worked incredibly well. And I know I spent much of this review comparing this movie to the first. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know one thing I make clear is that sequels, remakes, reboots, or any sort of adaptation should be judged more on its own merits rather than its comparisons to previous material. The reason I compared the two movies a few times here is because, as I said at the top of the review, this has pretty much the exact same tone of the first movie and had pretty much the same sense of humor. And while I liked the first movie, I didn't love it, so I'm sure some of you may ask, if this is so similar to the first movie, how is it you love this one but not the first one? So I wanted to make it clear how I felt the delivery of the jokes here worked much better for me than they did in the first, even though there were still plenty of the pop culture references and metagags that I critiqued the first movie for. At the end of the day, both movies are very enjoyable. I'm not even saying the first one's bad by any means. I'd still watch both with no hesitation. I just easily prefer this one. Overall, this does the job of what sequels are supposed to do by going bigger than the original, and it pays off well here. This is an extremely well-crafted action comedy that I couldn't recommend enough. It's not a perfect movie, as parts of the story have been done countless times before, but it's got a great energy, well-choreographed action scenes, hilarious jokes, and wonderful performances from a very talented cast. This is easily one of the finest entries in the X-Men series. Deadpool 2 gets a 9 out of 10. Up next, we get near the end as we talk about Dark Phoenix, and we'll have plenty to talk about there. Stay tuned for that, my review of New Mutants, and my ranking of the X-Men series coming very soon. So let me know, did you see Deadpool 2, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you find it funny, and did you like it more or less than the first Deadpool? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you next time.